Lovely.
Hello to all the people who are entering our Zoom room right now, and welcome to this, which is the third issue of the Brisbane Literary Mafia. If you don't know us already, it's Cass Moriarty and I are running these monthly, and we're getting Brisbane-based or Brisbane-connected ex-Brisbane authors to come on and chat to us about writers and writing. So you're just all on mute while this is happening, and at the end of the event tonight we might open the room up for a clap. So have your fingers on the buzzers so that you can unmute yourselves at the end of the event to open up for a clap. So I think it might be time to just start the event. So I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on. In this area here, it's the Yagara and the Turrbal people, and I'd like to pay my deepest respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and to any other elders who are here tonight. I'd also like to mention that because this is Zoom, we are zooming out onto the lands of many different Aboriginal people and different language groups. And I would like to acknowledge their elders as well, and to say that this is Aboriginal land, always was, always will be, and that sovereignty was never ceded. So on that note, it's very exciting tonight to introduce Cass Moriarty to you, and also I'm Krissy Kneen. I'm an author too, Brisbane based, and Cass Moriarty is here with me, and Cass is a dead set legend. She lives and writes in Brisbane. Her debut novel, The Promised Seed, was longlisted for the 2017 International Dublin Literary Award and shortlisted for the People's Choice category of the QLAs, and also for the emerging Queensland author category of the QLAs, the Queensland Literary Awards, which will be happening this Friday. So we're very excited to find out who the next lot of winners will be, and who the next emerging authors will be as well. So after that book, Cass followed up with Parting Words, which was published in 2017. She has a Bachelor in Business Communications degree from QUT and has worked in public relations, advertising and marketing. She has a husband and about 20 million children. So everybody welcome Cass Moriarty.
That was way too long an introduction, Krissy, and now I feel bad that I don't have a similar one to you, although I'm sure everybody knows who you are. Fabulous, fabulous Krissy, and all your wonderful books. But it's not about us tonight. We're really excited to introduce our special guest, Tracy Spicer. Now, I actually have a formal bio here that I'm going to read first. So Tracy Spicer AM is a multiple Walkley award-winning author, journalist and broadcaster who has anchored national programs for ABC TV and radio, Network 10 and Sky News. Her memoir, The Good Girl Stripped Bare, was a bestseller, and might I just say, a cracking good read if you haven't read that. It's a few years old now, but really worth looking that up. And Tracy is the creator and producer of the new phenomenon Wednesday Night Book Club, which has just been running for the last 15 weeks. That was an online book show which supports authors and performers during the pandemic. So a very timely support for authors there. But most importantly of all, Tracy is a member of the Brisbane Literary Mafia because she grew up in Redcliffe on the north side of Brisbane, and we actually went to uni together. We went to QUT it was back in the day. And Tracy, I still think I have some photos somewhere of some pretty outrageous fancy dress sharehouse parties, but perhaps we won't go into that at the moment. Anyway, welcome Tracy. And Tracy's decided to talk to us tonight about writing or not writing in the middle of a pandemic. So Tracy, welcome, and why this topic, and what do you think about it?
First of all, thank you for that lovely introduction, and I'm fully fangirling because Cass
You know, I love you. I love The Promised Seed, and I love Krissy's work. I just adored An Uncertain Grace. So thank you for what you've created here. Also, that start of that intro to me makes me sound really fancy, but I'm proudly a bogan from the outskirts of Brisbane, and I've got my husband's Ugg boots on tonight. So there you go. There's the proof. The reason why I thought this would be an interesting topic to talk about is because when we were getting authors and writers and columnists and performers together for the Wednesday night book club series, so many of them said to me, oh look, I'll come on and I'll talk about my book or I'll talk about someone else's book, but I have to admit I'm not reading at the moment because of the stress of the pandemic. And I don't know whether that has resonated with you at all, but I was supposed to be writing a new book. Well, I was supposed to be writing a new book over the last 2 or 3 years, and I haven't. And I thought after the Me Too stuff sort of wound down towards the end of last year that I could get cracking on writing this year. And the pandemic just sucked all my intellectual energy out. Are you finding that too, Cass and Krissy?
Yeah, look, I'm supposed to be writing, well, I am writing a non-fiction book and a fiction book. And the fiction book was the one that was in play when the pandemic hit. And it was actually a book about a pandemic. And so I felt completely shut down by the whole thing. I felt incapable of writing. And I've just, in the past week, I've actually gone back to it. The non-fiction book is tracking along okay. But the fiction book, I've found a few things are a problem. And I was going to ask you about it too. If you're writing contemporary fiction, I don't know whether you were at all, Tracy, but like contemporary fiction writers are a little bit stuck because is there a pandemic happening in your contemporary fiction book set in 2020, which is where my book was set? And there was a pandemic, but it was not the one that we expected, which I've had to take out. And now I'm having to weave the actual pandemic into the book, because I feel like just ignoring it is just ignoring you're putting your head in the sand and ignoring what's going on around you. How do you feel about that?
It must be incredibly tricky for contemporary fiction writers, as you say, Krissy. And my issue was slightly different because the book I'm researching is about the intersection between artificial intelligence and machine learning and gender and race. So, for example, the idea was sparked by my then, I think it was 11 or 10-year-old son turning around to me and saying, Mummy, I want a robot slave. And I said, what are you talking about, darling? He said, I want a Siri or an Alexa. And all of a sudden it dawned on me as a lifelong feminist that here we are doing all of this kind of work for equality and, more importantly, equity. And behind the scenes in IT companies around the world, they're creating robots that have embedded sexism and racism in them, which is going to push us backwards. And one example of that is the intelligent devices around our home that people are abusing. I mean, people are being terrible to Siri and Alexa, and no one ever changes the voices to a male voice because they like the idea of women, even robot women, being servile around the house. So I've been obsessed with this for about 4 or 5 years now. It's been marinating up there and cogitating. But then the pandemic came and I thought, who is going to want to read a book about that? Because while this is all certainly still happening behind the scenes at Google and Amazon, I've been interviewing an academic who actually went to the heads of some of the IT companies and told them about these problems a long time ago. And they said, oh, we know the problems, we just can't afford to fix them. So I think it's going to be a big societal issue, but I just don't know whether now is the time that I'm able to focus on it to its full extent, if that makes sense. I mean, writing is something we do out of passion, right? We don't necessarily do it for the money. So you've got to really be feeling that passion to do it.
I think we should just say, just for all the agents and publishers who are watching this closely, that yes, of course, we're all still writing. We're all busily thinking about writing, even if we're not actually writing. Yeah, I know you said to me, Tracy, that at the moment you were having trouble reading anything other than light crime and social media posts. So I totally agree. It's just been very hard to be creative and disciplined about being focused when you know, the world is in turmoil and there seems to be so much other important stuff going on that your mind is busy with, that it's been very difficult, I think, for a lot of creative people.
That's it. Mind you, if you do immerse yourself in a fantastic work of fiction, it is the greatest escapism. So while for the first 3 months of the pandemic, I hardly read at all, and if anything, I started reading a lot of poetry. I'll be interested to see if there's been a rise in the popularity of poetry over this time, and a lot of short stories and things like that. Just in the last month or two, I've started reading fiction again, and I found it to be the most wonderful escape to immerse yourself in a book over a weekend. Are you finding that? Are you both back to reading voraciously?
Yeah.
Well, I was wondering actually, because I think that there have been two camps of people during the pandemic, and there's been the camp of people who want to read about pandemics. They're the camp of people who've been going back to Camus, you know, and going to the dystopian novels. And then there are the people who don't want a bar of anything that has any kind of pandemic or any kind of trauma at the heart of it. And I wondered whether, Tracy, you had found in your book club, if you've had these conversations with people about what they wanted to read and whether you feel like they're weighing in on either side of this divide.
Definitely. We found a lot of people were put off by the idea of hearing from an author whose book was about trauma, because they felt like they were dealing with enough darkness in their own lives. I don't think we had any dystopian books actually, but certainly some of the more popular episodes were the ones around poetry. The incredible episode with Ellen van Neerven, Ellen, of course, who lives in Queensland, and Nakia Louie about Ellen's book of poetry, Throat, was wildly popular for a whole bunch of reasons. And so was Twee On's poetry book. So I think people were interested in short form, and they were interested in escapism. Anything that had a magic realism bent was incredibly popular.
We're massive fans of Ellen's, aren't we, Cass?
Yeah, we are. She's a sweetheart.
Yeah, the book is amazing, and the poems in Throat are really amazing. So that would have been a fantastic episode to be a part of, actually, when you did that poetry book.
Yeah, it was incredibly moving.
I wanted to ask you about the Wednesday night book club, about what the impetus was for it and how you went about setting it up. And I mean, the list of authors and interviewers that you had on there was kind of incredible. It was sort of this star-studded list of amazing people, many of them women too. And I just, I wanted to know how you sort of, where did the idea come from and how did you go about putting it into action?
I'm a bit of a fraud being in this conversation because I've only written one book and it was my memoir. But when I did go on the publicity tour for that around festivals and whatnot, it occurred to me how much effort publishers and the whole system, as well as authors, put into selling books, that it's very labour intensive. I mean, it's not digging ditches, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of work to sell books. So when the pandemic started to happen, my first thought as a lifelong voracious avid reader was of sadness for those authors who had lost that platform to sell their work, you know, this work that they've put their heart and soul into. It absolutely killed me. So I looked around for grants and I found a $5,000 grant from the copyright agency, and I thought, why don't I try to set up an online book show just for one series, 15 weeks, and, you know, give these authors a platform? Because, I mean, I'm fortunate, having worked in telly for 30 years, I know people who've got high profiles, and so I can just pick up the phone and say, can you come and interview this wonderful author and help them promote their book? So it was really about bringing people together to promote, particularly authors from marginalised communities. So I would say 99% of our authors were either women or from marginalised communities. but also to provide some beautiful warmth and comfort into people's homes when they were isolated. We know how many households are one-person households these days. We know that people are locked down. And I just wanted to create a kind of a, sounds weird, but a warm hug via digital connectivity for people.
No, it's not weird at all. It's. I think a lot of us were feeling that, you know, I'm still feeling that around this time, that how important it is to support authors that have got books, you know, maybe unfortunately coming out at this time. And as you say, there's no festivals, there's no launches, there's no tours. So I think the more we can do for those authors, the better. But the whole Wednesday Night Book Club was just done so well. The theme song, sorry, I've forgotten the name of the lady who sings it.
Candy Bowers, you know, I met
Candy Bowers. Oh,
10 years ago. She's a fabulous cabaret performer, multi-talented, writes her own stuff. And I knew that Candy was in LA getting this fantastic goddamn performing deal at the time the pandemic happened, and it all fell apart. She had to come back to Australia. She's was based in Victoria. There was nowhere for her to perform. So any performers that we got on board, Richard, who did our quiz, had a kidney cancer operation earlier this year, couldn't work. So it was just to provide work for people who were going through a tough time, as well as, you know, that beautiful comfort. And to Cass, to be honest, the other reason, and I don't want to disparage literary festivals, they are fantastic. Some of the best times of my life have been spent at book festivals, but there is a certain demographic who goes to them. So the reason why I wanted to have a quiz and a musical segment is to do the old TV thing, to make it very mass market, to bring mainstream people along who might not normally read a book like that or listen to an author like that, to attract them. And then they think, oh gosh, I'd really like to read that book. So it was about broadening the audience.
That's absolutely fantastic. I know that, you know, the pandemic has really changed the way book selling happens, and also book promotion happens. You know, as booksellers, we know that a lot of the books, the big release books that were going to happen in the beginning of this year, got held back to September because people thought that after, well, not everyone is out of lockdown now, but they thought after everyone's out of lockdown in September, we can have some in real life events, you know, and we can have promotions. And so all of the big names have been held off till September. And unfortunately, a lot of the debut authors just got put in the first part of the year. So it's felt like a very strange thing where we had kind of none of the big names and all of these struggling debut authors for the first 3 or 4 months of the year. And then suddenly we have more books than we could possibly put on the shelves. So we're having to make choices about what, as a bookshop, we can promote and stock, which is really hard for those authors too.
And it's hard for the bookstores too, Krissy, because if you run a bookstore, of course, you do it out of passion as well as for the money. And so you're kind of like, I really want to support these debut authors, but I know this mass market author is going to sell. So it's an invidious choice.
It is.
There's only so much space on the shelves.
But speaking, this is actually quite a good segue into the next part of our chat. So thanks for chatting to us about pandemic reading. But if you want to stay with us while Cass talks about some of her latest pandemic reading and promotes some of the Australian authors who she's read recently. But just before I introduce Cass, I never do this because it's all about Cass's reading, but this book is the one that I have been reading. It's not an Australian author. It's an author from the UK, Daisy Johnson. But oh my goodness, this book is really everything for me right now. If you're a fan of We've Always Lived in the Castle, that, you know, this is actually the book for you. It's a book that is a little bit strange, a little bit weird, a little bit, and incredibly beautiful. And I really reckon that anyone who likes something with a little bit of an edge to it, you should go and grab this book. Now, so Sisters is on my list, but... And
you're breaking the rules, Krissy, because we're only supposed to talk about Australian books, but you know,
I can't I love this book so much. I can't stop talking about it.
Before we let Tracy go, I just wanted, or you're welcome to stay, but thank you again so much for being so generous with your time and thoughts. anyone who gets a chance to visit Redcliffe will find a picture of Tracy in the Hall of Fame next to the Bee Gees. Yes, I have been and looked that up.
Hey, this will make you laugh. I took the kids there a couple of years ago to show them that. And I said, oh, look, Mum's in an arcade. And they said, they were very disappointed. They said, oh, Mum, we thought you were talking about an arcade with arcade games. We don't care about that. And just walk. No, seriously, Cass and Krissy, thank you for creating what you've created here. It's so important. Thank you, Avid. I love what you do, and more power to you.
And we'll hope to see your book very, very soon. The one about Siri and Alexa and the inherent sexism in the electronic servants. Very keen.
Get writing, Tracy.
I'll get back to it.
I'll get writing. Thanks for inspiring me, gals.
Okay, excellent. Now, Cass, what have you been reading?
What have I been reading? Well, a lot. And I'll talk about each of them quickly. The first one I wanted to talk about is, its actually release date is 2nd of September, so it's only a couple of days away. Ordinary Matter by Laura Elvary. She, of course, brought us the brilliant Trick of the Light, which was a collection of short stories. This is her second collection of short stories. This one has a theme, so each story is devoted to one of the 20 women who have won a Nobel Prize for Science since the first woman, Marie Curie, won in 1901, I believe. So the brilliant thing about this collection is that with each of the stories, Laura has sometimes the woman is a main character, sometimes it's a very tangential connection. It's absolutely so clever the way that she's done this, so that by the time you get to the end, you've got a picture of all the women scientists who've won the Nobel Prize, but you see different parts of their lives. Some of the stories are set in the future, some are in the past. It's a really, really clever idea, and I love the way she's done it. So I can definitely recommend that.
And we are going to be launching that too. We're going to have an Avid Reader Zoom launch of that too.
Of course we are, yes. Yes. The next book is also coming out on the 2nd of September. This is The Mother Fault by Kate Mildenhall. Again, her second book. I just finished reading this about a day ago, and honestly, completely breathless, just edge of the seat tension, it's like a thriller. But it's got themes of climate change, globalization, sort of big brother control of citizens. And it's all about that idea that it's very Margaret Atwood Handmaid's Tale, in that it's that idea that, the frog in the pot of water, it doesn't realize it's in trouble until the water starts to heat up. And so it's gradual changes in society that society is inflicting more control on its citizens. And the story is about Nim, a strong woman whose husband goes missing. And so she sets off with her children to find him, because everybody's microchipped, and the government should be able to find him, but even the government can't find him. So she suspects something is up. And so she goes on this amazing adventure, really, with her children. I know that Kate actually crewed on a yacht or some sort of sailing boat to research this novel, and you can really tell, because the section where she's on the sea voyage is just completely immersive. So absolutely wonderful book, great characters, great dialogue. I really think this is going to be a book to watch this year.
I think it's going to be huge, Cass. I think that book is going to be absolutely huge. Fans of Margaret Atwood will not be disappointed when they pick that book up. And
and also Alice Robinson, who wrote The Glad Shout. A lot of similarities between the two books. Uncanny similarities, really. So if you like Alice Robinson, you will love Kate's book.
And another launch for Avid Reader from that book as well.
Yes, I know. We do all the good launches, all the best launches. Now, the next one is a non-fiction book called The Details by Tegan Bennett Daylight. Now, Tegan is sort of a contemporary of Charlotte Wood and the late Georgia Blaine. So she's in some really you know, she's in a great writers group. she has a good writers group. Her writing I find to be very similar to Helen Garner. She's got that really simple way of writing prose, a very keen eye for observing small details and then making sense of them. So this is a non-fiction book about writing. So it's a whole lot of different chapters. Some of them are sort of memoir type things about her past experiences. Some of them are about her thinking about writing and trying to understand how writing works, how the structure of writing works. But so as a writer, if you're a writer, I can highly recommend this book, and it's quite slim, so it's not a huge tome to get through. But as a reader too, you know, it's very easy to read and just quite fascinating the way that she's composed all of these different sort of short non-fiction pieces to go together into this book. If you liked The Writer's Room, which Charlotte Wood put together, which was interviews with writers, then I think that you would really like the details.
And yet again, there's a YouTube video of the launch of her book, which we did early in the pandemic. So people can
okay, great.
go to our YouTube channel and have a look at that too.
Yeah. Okay. 2 more to go. This one's been out a little while now. This is The Animals in That Country by Laura Jean Mckay. This is a highly original pandemic story, so I think it's appropriate to include it at the moment because we are, of course, in a pandemic. This has got one of the most fantastic protagonists in it that I've read for a long time, Jean. She's a sort of furiously smoking, drinking, swearing, quite objectionable in some ways, older woman who has a great relationship with her granddaughter and with her dingo, Sue. She works in a wildlife park and she, you know, she's really into the animals much more than the people. But it's all about a pandemic that starts down south and makes its way up north. And the main symptom of this pandemic is that people can understand the animals. So not only can they start by understanding mammals and then reptiles and then even insects. And so you can imagine if you can hear everything that every living thing is saying to you in your head, there's this huge cacophony of noise and it's starting to send people a little bit mad. And she goes, there's a lot more that happens, but basically she goes on a big adventure to try and rescue her granddaughter. And it's a really good read.
This is one of my favourite books of the year, Cass.
Oh, there you go.
I absolutely adored that. In fact, there's a line from the book which I have written down and stuck above my work desk to remind me to write better. I write better words, which is dead sky meat, which is what one of the animals calls rain. And as soon as I read that, I went, it's Sue, who I think is the protagonist, the dingo.
Okay, yeah.
Sue says dead sky meat, and they realise that she's talking about rain. And that made me go, oh, look, that is the way to think. That, don't think about things in the way that you naturally do. Try and think about them in a different way. I love this book so much.
It's so original, this book. You know, the fact that the voices, the fact that we can understand what the animals are saying, even though we can't always, they're not always speaking our exact language, and that takes a bit of decoding to work out what they're saying, like you just, as that example that you just gave. But the whole idea of the book itself is highly original and very timely, you know, very timely at the moment.
Yeah, I hope everyone gets a hold of a copy of that.
And the last book on my list for tonight is a debut, no, she's not a debut author, but I think this might be her first book for adults. So Christine Bell, No Small Shame. Now this is a historical novel set in the First World War. It's got a very strong female protagonist, Mary O'Donnell, who with her family and another family moved from a life in Scotland in the mines, which is, you know, dirty and dangerous and not very well sort of paid, and they migrate to Australia. But it's all about the things that happen to her along the way, the relationships that she forms, the obstacles that she has to face. And even though she's a woman of 100 years ago, I think that women today will read her story and recognise, like, you can recognise ourselves in her struggles, because we're all still struggling with the same things. There's some great twists in this book. It's one of those books that you think you know where it's going to go. You think it's going to head down a certain path, and then suddenly something happens, or someone makes a choice, or a decision is made for them that sort of completely turns it around. So that keeps it really interesting too. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. And this is the sort of book that you can give to your, you know, your mother, your grandmother, your, you know, people who like a good historical romance. There's romance in there. Sorry.
Your father for Father's Day.
Maybe father for Father's Day. But it's very tender, and there's a lot of looking at deep issues of relationships and family and love and betrayal and sacrifice and all that sort of thing. So
we have lots of tender dads who like reading lots of romantic books.
Yeah.
Encourage.
So this might be one for them. So that's my rundown of my 5 books for the month.
Fantastic, Cass. You've been doing such a great job of your reading. We do love your reviews that come fast and furious. So if anyone hasn't caught up with Cass's reviews already, we share quite a few of them on our social media, and also Cass's website has basically every new Australian book that comes out you get to read, which is wonderful.
Yeah. So if you're looking for something to read, look on the review section and pick out the ones that appeal to you.
Absolutely. Now, I just before we go, Tracy, are you still with us, or have you had to run off to another gig? No?
I'm here.
Oh, she's there.
Tracy has changed. She's moved position and she's making a laptop float.
I was furiously taking notes based upon Cass's recommendations. This is what I was doing. That's why I turned off the video.
I saw that you were there, so I thought, oh, you must be lurking. Have you been reading anything very important that you want to share with us lately?
Look, I just read Trent Dalton's book, All Our Shimmering Skies. And I know that Boy Swallows Universe really divided people, but I devoured Shimmering Skies over the weekend and loved it because it was tremendous escapism. The villain, Aubrey Hook, is one of the best drawn villains I think I've seen in Australian writing recently. And the protagonist is this magnificent young girl. And she's the kind of character that everyone will fall in love with. And the story is brutal and it's bloody, but it's also magical and heartfelt. I absolutely loved it.
Oh, fantastic.
Great recommendation.
Well, look, we've got lots of books too. Oh, sorry, Cass, what was that?
I was just going to say, before we finish too, we mustn't forget, I know you mentioned the QLAs briefly, but we did promise them, because, you know, as with everything else, the QLAs aren't running in real life this year. They'll be virtually on Friday night. But I just wanted to congratulate all of the people on the shortlist. There's way too many for us to sort of list them. Some of them we've already talked about on this Zoomcast, some of the books that are now shortlisted, but there are some fantastic fiction, non-fiction, short stories, you know, some really great authors. So if you're interested in Queensland, well, actually Australian writing, because of course it's all over Australian writers can enter, tune in on Friday night, look up the State Library of Queensland and watch the Queensland Literary Awards.
And of course, you will notice in the shortlists that, again, the Brisbane writers are punching well and truly above their weight.
Yes.
I have to say this, Brisbane and ex-Brisbane writers are everywhere throughout Australia. And we're really, I am so proud of our Brisbane writers, because they're totally ahead of the game at the moment. And I also want to do another quick shout out to all the people in Melbourne who have been, in lockdown for a ridiculous amount of time. Many of the people in Melbourne that I know are ex-Brisbane writers, actually, who are actually down in Melbourne at the moment. And it's a wonderful place. I love Melbourne. It's the place that I would move to in a second if I could. I adore you. I'm so sorry that you're in lockdown. And please, everybody, support your local Melbourne bookstores as well, because of course the businesses down there are struggling too. So, first pick Avid Reader, second pick your Melbourne bookstore, I reckon. And on that note, I think that we might be done for another month. So thank you, Tracy, for joining us. That was
thank you, Tracy.
Excellent conversation. And thank you, Cass, for joining me again. And we will just briefly open up the room. If you feel like clapping at the end today, now is your chance. I think Mckay is just making it so you can turn your audio on and we can clap.
Thank you, Krissy. Great job. Oh, it's so good to see everybody.
Thanks, Cass. Thanks,
I'm going to change my
Krissy.
screen so I can see everybody. Oh, look at everybody.
Hello.
Nice, happy faces.
Thanks, everyone. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mckay.
Thanks for tuning in. See you next month.
Bye.